Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with some multiplayer footage of Krell and Kemmler running vampire accounts against Brettonia here, commanded by Drens in the quick match for Total War Warhammer. Now, I did some theory crafting with Krell, and I think that Brettonia is one of the factions Kemmler with Krell can be actually fairly potent against. This is because Brettonia, especially in the current meta, is fairly reliant on its infantry, and the way it makes its infantry very powerful is through the Grail Relic. The fact that the Grail Relic provides them with plus 16 leadership and psychological immunity means that the Brettonian infantry become ridiculously resilient to all sorts of psychology, or all sorts of morale issues. They'll basically never break, or at least definitely not until they're down to the last few men. And the Grail Relic allows all of this because it gives plus 16 leadership and immunity to psychology. Normally vampires have some serious issues getting to it. If you don't have a Vargulf or are willing to suicide a Vampire of Death, for example, with Spirit Leech onto it, which is both a very expensive solution, then you're probably not going to be able to reach the Grail Relic. So I did some theory crafting, and I think that Krell could be a very solid counter. The Grail Relic does have to be within about, I do believe it's 40 meters of the front line to be providing its boost. And Krell can be cast from 60 meters away. Now there's a 135 second cooldown, so I'm hoping it the cooldown goes off or is finished before I reach the main front line. But then I'm hoping to use Krell to shut down the Grail Relic. Now I was only expecting one. The enemy did bring two here, which is going to be a bit of a problem. But if I can at least shut down one, that could allow me to roll up one wing of the Brettonian line and then collapse the rest of them. There's also the problem that normally if you can't keep constant pressure on it, Brettonia does tend to bring the Fan Enchantress, and the Fan Enchantress can just cast Regrowth or whatever and heal it right up. Which once again can be a bit of a problem for the vampire accounts to deal with. So, for my comp, to try to make Krell work here, I'm obviously running Kemmler, that's mandatory. Kemmler is completely maxed out except for a handful of spells. The only spells I put on him are Raise Dead, Van Hell's Dance Macabre, and Invocation of Nehek. I do have everything else on Kemmler that he could possibly have. I did bring a Vampire of Death, both of my Vampire and a Vampire of Shadows. Both of my Vampires are actually maxed out. I was thinking about doing double Vampires of Death, but then I decided, because I do like Occam's Mindrazor, Enfeeble, and Pit of Shades, I was hoping to make use of Occam's Mindrazor and Enfeebling Foe to make the Grail Relic easier for Krell to kill. And then a Vampire of Death with Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna. They both have scrolls of shielding to do damage reduction, and otherwise they're completely maxed. They have all their abilities. Obviously they're not mounted. Brettonia can bring a very strong air contingent, so I don't want them getting destroyed by Pegasus Knights or Flying Lords. And, it's obviously not a guarantee that they'll bring the Fan Enchantress, and if they don't, someone like Lewin or even a generic Brettonian Lord could trash these guys in there. Then I'm bringing Graveguard for a front line, 5 units of them. Generic Graveguard, not Sternsman, because I was worried about fire damage. Then 2 units of Blood Knights to give me a strong cavalry contingent. Graveguard will actually trade fairly well, especially with Invocation of Nehek or Dance Macabre. They will trade fairly well against Brettonian infantry, because they have good armor, they have silver shields, and they have anti-infantry bonus. The only thing that will give them a bit of an issue is Foot Squires, who also have an anti-infantry bonus and armor piercing. Blood Knights, of course, just to shut down enemy cav to get in their backlines. Give me just a very strong cavalry contingent. And then finally, with my remaining points, I bought a generic Corpse Cart, which does have, it's not no lodestone, none of that, just a generic one. But given that Graveguard doesn't have the best of melee stats, I'm hoping to make use of the Corpse Cart to beef him up and make him better in combat. My opponent, I think we're at a somewhat ordinary Brettonia comp. 3 Foot Squires, 2 Men-at-Arms with pole arms, 2 peasants. The peasants probably just meat shield, soften up any charges. Then 2 Grail Guardians who seem to be defending the Grail Relic, which is sitting in a position to cover most of my opponent's front line. I do believe most of his units are being buffed by it, except for the pole arms by the look of it. Yeah, it looks like the pole arms aren't being affected by the relic. But even the peasants are being affected, so they won't break as easily. Then 4 units of peasant bowmen with fire arrows, which is why I really don't like bringing regeneration against the Brettonia. They do tend to bring peasants bowmen with fire arrows, which makes crypt horrors and Varric Retrievers, that sort of stuff, somewhat susceptible. And then a blessed field trebuchet in the back. That was a bit of a surprise. I didn't expect that, or this many archers for that matter. And then a Fan Enchantress. Vampire accounts usually do okay against range units because they can drop zombies on them. So it's not the end of the world, but so I wasn't expecting quite this many. And yeah, Fanchantress, fairly common pick. She does have the Lure of Life, which is potent. And of course the Mist of the Lady, Aura. Now I'm going to start immediately. I'm going to fast forward through the beginning. I was checking out what they brought, and only realized they had trebuchets once the first shots were off. And so yeah, I'm pushing forward. Now I do take a volley into my Blood Knights, who I then flank around. I'm trying to get around the sides. My opponent is not particularly good about using his trebuchet here. I think he's not really staying focused on a single target. So he fires at the Graveguard, and I think he fires at my Wizards. I see the fire arrows, and I decide to leave the Corpse Cart behind. It is a fairly large target, and it has regeneration, so it's going to be incredibly susceptible to fire arrows. I don't want to have it lose it just yet. Now, in the meantime, my front line is closing. My Blood Knights are basically just posturing on the flanks here, and my opponent is moving his Grail Guardians to counter him. Obviously, Blood Knights can trash Grail Guardians or beat them fairly soundly in a straight-up fight, but Men-at-Arms with Polearms could just shift in, and they would most likely absolutely crush the Blood Knights. So I don't want that to happen. In the meantime, I'm finally pushing up the Corpse Cart. These fire arrows are not doing very much at all to my Graveguard. They're very tanky. My opponent, unfortunately for him, I think, throws his Grail Guardians into the Graveguard, which is a mistake. The Graveguard are fairly tanky. Grail Guardians... Well, Grail Guardians are certainly powerful cavalry. They don't and have an anti-infantry bonus, I do believe. Actually, they don't even have an anti-infantry bonus. That was the Graveguard I was looking at. They have magic attack and good defense. They're very tanky for infantry, and they don't lose vigor. They have physical resistance, all that sort of stuff. So they're very tanky for a cav unit, but they don't dish out all that much damage. And I think, especially for a cavalry unit that costs so much, so my opponent's damage output's fairly limited, and they're not going to do very well against the Graveguard. It's going to take him a while to chew through them. In the meantime, Blood Knights are coming in from behind. Going to get into his backline. These Men-at-Arms and Polearms are not positioned well enough to deal with him. He's not paying attention to these Grail Guardians. My Graveguard are just pushing in. Kemmler's getting focused hard. I'm forced to cast just about everything to keep him alive. But he is out healing them, and I drop Krell right here on the Grail Relic, and it immediately starts beating up on it. I think I made a mistake here. I should have dropped Krell. I dropped him to like the flank of the Grail Relic, or maybe a little behind. I should have dropped him right in front of it, so that way when the Grail Relic fled, it would flee backwards towards the archers, rather than staying in the front line here. That was definitely a mistake on deployment. I dropped my 2 vampires straight into the foot squires because they will do incredibly well in melee. The vampires both dish out decent weapon strength, okay melee defense, and very, very high melee attack. So and 90 armor. So they will, if they're in melee, they'll do very well. Kemmler's doing fine. He's popping Arcane Conduit, just getting more magic off. These Graveguard are trying to tie down the Grail Guardians, not doing the best job, but Graveguard very well are kind of winning the infantry fight. Blood Knights are on one of the Grail Relics. Other Blood Knights are mopping up the rear line while being pursued by Men-at-Arms with Polearms who simply can't keep up. They're still wanting you to Men-at-Arms or Peasant Bowmen with fire arrows, but they're not really able to do very much. They're trying to take pot shots at Kemmler, but he's doing A-okay. I don't know what spell was being popped there. Something was being popped. Maybe it was me trying to pop something and failing. I do have the Tomb Blade for Kemmler, so I do believe he is regenerating in melee. The Grail Relic is actually fairly tanky. I do drop a Spirit Leech on it. I think the Fanchantress might have dropped a heal on it when I wasn't paying attention. It's not dying as quickly as I would like. It just dropped to 766, but it is holding up somewhat surprisingly well against Krell. And Krell is being distracted. This is a problem I've found with Krell. It's kind of a problem with all heroes in general when they're in a bigger fight. They start getting distracted, and he's chasing after the Fanchantress when really what I want him doing is killing the Grail Relic. I don't give a damn about the Fanchantress. But unfortunately, the AI is being distracted. He does get another meaty hit into the Grail Relic. It is slowly dying. A little too slowly for my taste. Some of the Graveguard are breaking. The Graveguard are obviously not doing very well against the Grail Guardians. It's just a bit of a fight between two units armed with wet noodles, basically speaking. Vampires, of course, are absolutely thrashing the enemy infantry and the Grail Relic now. My opponent does drop Earthblood over here to try to sustain these guys, but they will not be able to stay intact against the 2 vampires. Vampires are very powerful in melee, and even though they're spellcasters, they're still very, very solid melee fighters. In the meantime, I'm trying to keep my Blood Knights roaming around, getting kills. They're already up to 2 chevrons, so I'm trying to keep them roaming. This Grail Relic is finally falling apart. It's wavering, but then it gets away. Krell is still trying to get on top of it. I do think the Graveguard should finish off shortly. Graveguard are crumbling, but the remaining these Graveguards should be able to hold. Krell, though, is dying, and I'm trying to pull him away. I'm trying to force path him over here, but he doesn't have very much mass. He's struggling to push through. I'm trying to get Krell in there, try to either kill the Grail Relic. My Graveguard do catch it. Now they will beat it to death with their swords. In the meantime, though, Krell is trying to tie down these guys to allow Kemmler to escape. He's definitely doing that bodyguard duty there. My Blood Knights just finished off these archers, chased them away for good, and some foot squires. Now they're pulling back, trying to mop up this Grail Relic. The vampires are doing absolutely amazing work. Vampires are, like I said, fairly ridiculous melee combatants. They're doing very, very well. Kemmler's almost dead. He's actually reached his healing cap, so he's no longer. At this point, all he can do is die. But I did drop zombies around him to block the Fanchantress, and now I've got Krell beating her up. Krell has actually gained a Chevron, which is definitely impressive. He's just been dishing out a lot of damage, and I do believe it just takes down the Fanchantress here. Yeah, there's the corpse. So Krell actually gets 2 chevrons. He's definitely dishing out the hurt. Grail Guardians are doing well. I'm pushing Krell into him though. Now Kemmler takes a volley, and this could have been a bit disastrous for me if those archers had to hit a little better. But instead, I think they were either focused on the Blood Knights or Krell, and they don't hit Kemmler, so Kemmler gets away with a smidgen of his HP. And at this point, my opponent's army shatters now that those Grail Relics are finally off the field. So definitely a good game to my opponent. It wasn't a bit of an interesting build. He did go heavy into skirmish units against vampires who were fairly good at shutting him down, despite not having skirmish of their own. Krell didn't get a lot of kills, but he did beat up the Fanchantress really badly. He took on one of the Grail Relics. And I think that tying down the enemy hero and tying down the enemy lord and tying down the Grail Relic is quite an achievement in of itself. I do wish I had been able to take the Grail Relic with him. I think there were some issues. I don't think I dropped Oakham's Mindrazor on him. Or Enfeebling Foe on the Grail Relic to soften it up. I should have dropped the Spirit Leech sooner. I should have positioned Krell better. There were definitely some mistakes that I made there that I could have just done better with. For my opponent, his archers did almost nothing. They performed very poorly against Graveguard. The only thing they could have really done well against was Corpse Cart and Kemmler, and I think I kept those fairly well clear of them. The rest of his units, of course, the Man-at-Arms and Polearms didn't do that great, but they were mostly fighting, I think, Blood Knights and Graveguard, so there's not too much. There's not that many kills to be had there. The Grail Relics obviously didn't fight, and the Grail Relics I don't actually lasted fairly long. I think the one on the left, the one that on my left flank, the one on my opponent's right, the one that Krell actually didn't get after, I think that one was chased off a fair bit sooner because the Blood Knights and Vampires got to it. But that was a much heftier investment than Krell going after the other one. Krell's only 173 gold. The peasants didn't do anything that's obvious against Graveguard. Even with the boost to their leadership, they weren't going to be able to hold. Fanchantress got very little done, and I just barely managed to keep Kemmler alive. I'm not sure I'm running the ideal comp on skill abilities and stuff with Kemmler. Some of his the Chaos Tombblade, for example, requires him to be in melee, I do believe, to be healing, while his other ability... So basically just the other ability requires other healing ability requires Master of Undead, I think, requires him to be out of melee, so he only gets one of them. I guess it is beneficial because it means that no matter what, he's healing everything around him. Graveguard performed very well. Blood Knights performed very well. Krell obviously not visible. Corpse Cart not going to be fighting very much. Probably helped the Graveguard clear through the enemy infantry a little better. Vampires did very well, I think. So I definitely I'm fairly satisfied with this build. I definitely think there's some things I could do better. For my opponent, like I said, those didn't do too well. The Grail Guardians obviously they did get a fair amount of kills, but some of those might have been summoned zombies later on. Probably most of them would be Graveguard. So not a bad kill count, but given their cost, probably not worth it. So I definitely think Krell has some potential at shutting down something like Grail Relic. Obviously, as a bodyguard unit, he did some bodyguard work there for Kemmler. He definitely has some potential, especially given how cheap he is. He's only 173 gold, which I think people are overlooking. You'll see a lot of one-on-one comparisons, or like how he'll get beaten down by a lot of heroes. But he is cheap. He's a dirt cheap summon that doesn't cost mana. So if you can last those first 135 seconds to be able to summon him, he's very potent. Once again, I thank my opponent for the great game. Had lots of fun. I hope you guys like the gameplay of Krell. Getting to see what some potential ideas for him or those potential strats for him are. And I appreciate you all for watching. If you enjoyed, hit like or subscribe down below. If you have any tips or suggestions or any ideas on how I can make my videos better, what I can improve, feel free to share them in the comments. I'll be sure to read them and respond. Otherwise, I thank you all for watching, and Wyvern out.